graduated with a degree in computer science or finance or some other highly technical degree, your odds of landing that first job are much, much greater than if you've studied liberal arts. There are hundreds of thousands of college graduates each year that have studied liberal arts. I was one of them when I graduated college. Compared to pre-professionally trained computer science, finance, or other types of technical graduates, it's much harder to get the job, and the statistics bear that out. There's a much greater preponderance of underemployment, things that you're doing that didn't require your study, or unemployment. And in fact, your compensation in the early years is lower than it is for the technically trained graduates. So it's a challenge. The good news is, if you've studied liberal arts and studied topics across multiple disciplines and figured out how to synthesize information, how to think critically, how to analyze data, how to communicate, those are the skills that lead to higher order careers. If you've studied liberal arts, in the short term, it's really challenging to get those first jobs. But once you get launched and you're in the workforce, you have the opportunity to apply what it is you studied and then start thriving in your career. Personally, I'm convinced that a liberal arts education will be invaluable to your career. It turns out that the skills that you acquire through liberal arts education, critical thinking, information synthesis, problem solving, communications, those are the things that employers genuinely value most. The challenge then is how to get into a place to start to apply them.
If we have a young man or a young woman that is not an econ major, and so maybe they might be studying religion, for example, but they want to go work on Wall Street, how can they get up to speed with some of the skill sets that are needed to get into, say, for example, investment banking? And some of those skill sets might be better utilization or more knowledge, proficiency in Excel, using Excel for financial modeling.
It's important to point out that liberal arts can be highly technical, highly quantitative, and just because you've studied English or history doesn't mean you can't also study or double major in biomedical engineering or computer programming. In fact, some of the most popular majors of liberal arts colleges and universities are quite technical and very quantitative. So let's talk concretely about what to do if you're a liberal arts grad. The first thing is know your skills and what you want to do. This is not unlike developing your elevator pitch that we talked about earlier. Know your resume. Just because you have a high grade point average from a prestigious college doesn't mean that employers will therefore say, oh, you should do this for me. It's up to you to try and translate that into something that you'd be interested in and something that you could become qualified for. The next piece of advice is to become skilled in the disciplines of tomorrow. We're living in a world where technology, quantitative analysis, and big data are absolutely essential to many, many different industries. Study engineering, even if you're interested in the classics or a foreign language or history or English, at least take some courses in technical disciplines that will give you an exposure and a fluency in the terminology.
Well, I do think that a liberal arts education gives you a strong foundation for doing certain kinds of things. But given the changing nature of the economy, I think what's really important for liberal arts students to do is to supplement their interest and aptitude in the liberal arts with an understanding of things that are scientific or technical. That's not to say that they have to become Google class coders or that they need to pick up a master's in electrical engineering from MIT, but you do have to become fluent in the topics. You do have to have a sufficient amount of understanding in the topics, or take the background that you have in the liberal arts and then match that to some skills, some development in the field of finance and economics. So a lot of the time when I do spend time with technology companies, big or small, or life sciences companies, big or small, they aren't going to hire anybody who simply doesn't understand their content, but they oftentimes do need employees with skills and attributes from the humanities, whether it's communication skills, a real understanding of behavioral psychology or emotional intelligence.
If you want a lot of growth opportunities, development opportunities, job opportunities, go into an industry that's growing and dynamic.
That's exactly right. Some of the best known executives in the technology field did not come out of technical backgrounds. I'm thinking about my friend Sheryl Sandberg, for example. She was a student of economics. She worked at the Treasury Department. She worked at the World Bank. She had a very traditional liberal arts background in economics and moved to Silicon Valley and initially went to work for Google. And now she's considered a high-tech executive. She is a high-tech executive, but what she figured out how to do was leverage her skills in the humanities and make them very relevant in the business of technology.
And don't forget about career services. It's easy to overlook them, but they want to help. Go meet with them early and often. They can show you where people who have taken coursework in majors like you've done, what they've gone on to do, and provide some introductions. Another piece of advice is to think globally. True, many of you may want to work in cool cities where many of your fellow friends, college graduates, are living, but it's a big world out there, and some of the emerging economies have more opportunities than there might be in Silicon Valley or New York City.
The world is a 196-country chessboard, and in the same way in which many of the great fortunes, many of the great careers that have been made over the last 10 or 15 years have been made by people who chose to really immerse themselves in fast-growing emerging economies like, say, China. There are a whole new group of countries that I think are going to develop very quickly over the next 10 or 15 years.
And here's another thing to think about: breaking into your career through the function of sales. And while you might think sales is beneath you if you've studied some very esoteric intellectual pursuit, it's actually not, because nothing in the world happens without sales. Even engineers, professors, academics, it's all about selling. Nothing happens without something being driven by advocacy and selling. Sales could actually be the best job in the world if you like people, if you're good at building relationships, you like to communicate. Jay Walker, one of the legendary entrepreneurs in the United States, the founder of Priceline, said to me once, "There's no such thing as an unemployed great salesperson. If you want great job security, be a great salesperson. They're always in demand because nothing happens without sales."